I remember the morning sunlight filtering through the kitchen window, lighting the tiny dust that drifted in the air. It was bright, completely at odds with the weight that had settled in my chest. My coffee tasted bitter, and it had nothing to do with how I brewed it. Across from me sat my wife, Melanie, pretending to read the Riverton Herald. She kept stirring her tea, as if the spoon could keep her nerves in line. To my right, her daughter, my stepdaughter, Sophie, tapped at her phone like a lifeline. We had been married 5 years. 5 years of small highs and small lows, and a routine that dulled the edges of everything. Nothing in those early minutes announced disaster, but there were cracks, fine lines that widened until they could not be ignored. Melanie and I once shared warmth, quiet talks about plans, even silly back and forth about shows on at night. Now we exchanged grunts, half comments about bills and schedules, and attention so heavy it took up space at the table. As I took a sip, a shift in the room suggested something large was about to land. Melanie folded the paper and placed it down with fussy precision. She held the edges and bit her lip as if gathering courage. My stomach knotted. The last few weeks had been off. I tried to blame stress or fatigue or some mistake of mine. I would have accepted any reason but the one I feared. That fear kept whispering that the worst had arrived. Her phone had been the first siren. She never put it down, even in bed. It stayed locked, notifications hidden. She would flip it face down when I walked in, like I was trespassing in a private world. Months of that turned me into a suspicious wreck. I kept telling myself to be reasonable, and the thought refused to quiet. One dull weeknight, I hired a private investigator. It cost $2,000 that could have padded Sophie's college account, but I needed the truth. The truth was ugly. Melanie was back in contact with her ex-husband, Damien. The same man she divorced after a storm of bruises, bottles, sirens, and orders from judges. That was the man she chose over me, lied about, and, as I learned soon after, met behind my back. So I waited, and that morning she chose to set off her little charge. She closed the paper, pressed her lips together, and finally spoke. "Evan," she said, soft but tight, "I need to tell you something." My heart hammered. I set the mug down and heard the dull clink on wood. I kept my voice even. "Go ahead. I am listening." Sophie glanced up, flicked her gaze between us, and smirked before returning to the screen. She wore cynicism like a jacket, and rarely took it off. I ignored it and watched Melanie. She drew in a breath. "I'll be out of the house for a month." The words dropped into the room like a stone into still water. I stayed quiet. A month was no quick visit. Something big was being declared. I nodded and let her continue. "I mean," she said, "I am going to stay with Damien. It is his birthday month." Her voice trembled and her eyes met mine. "I want to make it good for him. And if I tell you, it is not really cheating." The logic was so absurd, I nearly laughed. Not cheating because she announced it. Disbelief washed over me, but I kept my face calm. She was baiting me for permission, or an explosion she could use. I gave her neither. "Okay," I replied, flat. She looked confused at my lack of fireworks. I saw her brace for a fight that did not come. I asked what sat on my tongue. "So, what exactly are you planning there, Melanie? Are you cooking, cleaning, and sharing his bed in one bundle? Is that the plan? Did he run out of money to hire help?" Her face flared. "What is wrong with you? Do not call me a maid or worse. I am going to be with him the way a wife is with a husband." My mouth went dry. "You already have a husband," I said. "Remember the vows." She shrugged, trying to appear casual and landing on defensive. "It is not cheating if I told you," she insisted. "I am being honest, so it does not count as betrayal. You cannot accuse me of sneaking when I say it to your face." I breathed slowly and kept neutral. I felt Sophie stare, so I shot her a glance. She wore a satisfied curve, as if the tension fed her. Of course she preferred her father, Damien. Then the real sting landed. Sophie spoke. "Mom has needs," she said. contempt cutting every word. She does not have to wait for you to be interesting. She is free to do what she wants. You do not own her. Rage spiked, and I pressed it down. Sophie, I said, that is between Melanie and me. This is our marriage. She lifted a shoulder. I am involved too. If I want to see my dad, or if she wants to see her ex, that is none of your business. And it is not cheating if she announces it. I studied her face and saw smug defiance. That was it. She was not just cheering. She was a partner in it. The investigators' photos had caught her present during some visits. This ran deeper than I had guessed. I kept my calm. Well, I said, hands raised, I am outnumbered. If you two already decided, I will not stand in your way. But Melanie, if you go off for a month to play house with your ex, I have terms. She folded her arms. Terms. Do not lecture me on morals, Evan. You are not my father. No lecture. During these 30 days, we are legally separated. You sign. You forfeit any support from me for you or Sophie. In return, I am free to do whatever I want. No obligations. Are you serious? Dead serious. You want freedom. Have it. But I will not bankroll the affair, and I will not be the fool when you return. I want it on paper. I turned to Sophie. That means I am not paying for anything of yours during that time. College, car, phone bills, nothing. Sophie snorted, and doubt flickered in her eyes. I can handle my stuff. My dad will help, she said, thinner than usual. Melanie cut in. Fine, draft the papers. I will sign. That quickly, with ease that cut me, she agreed to set aside our marriage for a month. My throat tightened, and I forced a cool smile. All right, I will call the lawyer. That was the beginning of the ugliest chapter of my life, and I had already prepared for it. I had photos, messages, even video. My response would be swift, legal, and financially thorough. If Melanie wanted to risk us on a man who once nearly destroyed her, I would show her what that choice cost. The next day, the documents were drawn. Melanie, arrogant as ever, signed without reading. I caught Sophie peering over and grinning as the pen moved. There was nothing for Sophie to sign. She was 18 and still in high school. The agreement covered my refusal to support either of them. My attorney, Mr. Patel, called it unusual but workable. Melanie wore triumph and shaky bravado, convinced she was in the right. Sophie whispered in her ear, urging her to sign and promising I could not do anything real about it. I heard the whisper and clenched my jaw. Their shared scorn had been there for months. The times Sophie slipped out and refused to say where she went. She had pushed Melanie back to Damien. Melanie, pulled by old wounds and a strange nostalgia for chaos, followed. Let us finalize it by morning, I said. Court will stamp it, then you can go. Great, Melanie snapped. I have a month to look forward to, and you can do whatever you want. Sounds good, I said, with a calm I did not feel. She packed with a hum, folding clothes into a large suitcase. Sophie helped, digging through drawers and chirping. Wear the black dress Dad bought you. It will drive Damien wild. I stood in the doorway with folded arms. It looked like vacation prep. In a way it was. The last sting came when Sophie said, Do not worry, he will not do anything. When we get back, everything will be fine. If he tries anything, we will say he forced you to sign. That was when I knew she was the driver. She insisted that announcing it meant no cheating, and that they could twist it later. The depth of it stunned me, and hardened my resolve. I would not let them use me again. No more. They valued nothing I offered as husband or stepfather. It was time to cut the ties. Melanie caught me in the doorway. Do you have anything better to do? She said. We will finish up, and Sophie and I will head to Damien's. I want no drama. You will get a wave, I said. That is all. They left that evening with suitcases in hand. Melanie swept through the living room like she was checking out of a hotel. Sophie trailed behind with a grin. She did not even look at me. I followed them to the porch, leaned on the rail, and raised a hand. Bye. Drive safe. Damien's place is across town. Enjoy your month." Sophie shouted that I had made the biggest mistake of my life. Then they were gone. The car pulled away. The house went quiet. My chest felt hollow and my mind felt clear. I locked the door and poured a tall whiskey. I sipped and let the burn settle. Now it was my turn. Over the next days, I set the plan in motion. First, I arranged to sell Sophie's car. It was titled to me and paid with my money. She always hated the color. That would no longer be her problem because it would no longer be her car. Then I sold Melanie's car, the one she bragged about online as if she had bought it. I had. With a separation on record, she had no claim. I drained our joint accounts. We had set aside money for bills, trips, emergencies, and a large chunk tagged for Sophie. I put nearly all of it into a private account I had prepared. If Sophie wanted tuition, her parents could fund it. The guilt twinged and then left when I remembered her grin. She helped push her mother back into the arms of the man who once hurt her. I would not pay for that any longer. I also moved to sell the house that stood in my name. In truth, I intended to keep it, but in the short term, I made sure that when day 30 arrived, the locks would be changed, and any claim of spousal right would be gone. For good, I canceled every phone line tied to my name that either of them used. Petty maybe, but after everything, petty felt like balance. The quiet that followed was strange and clean. I woke to coffee without dread. I watched an old film and read a paperback and slept without the blue glow of her phone flashing at 2 a.m. On the 5th day, the calls began. Melanie rang my cell twice in an hour. I let both go. Then Sophie tried, leaving clipped messages that escalated with each minute. "Evan, pick up, you liar. We know you did something with the money. Mom's card got declined. Call me back." I poured a small drink and let the voicemail collect their outrage. When the house phone rang, I stared at the old cordless buzzing across the coffee table. I answered because I wanted the noise to end. "Where are you?" Melanie snapped. "We have been calling your cell. Sophie has been calling you." I swirled the glass and kept my voice light. "I am taking care of my own desires. Busy, you know. That is not funny. Why did you empty the accounts? I just got notices that everything is gone." "What are you talking about?" I said. "You agreed to 30 days of separation. That means I can handle my assets as I see fit. I wanted a warm beach, and that takes funds." "You cannot do that," she said, breath hitching. "Sophie's college fund was in there. She needs that. And we need. Also the cars," she managed. "What did you do to our vehicles?" "I sold my vehicles," I said. "You and Sophie did not pay for them. You are staying with Damien. He can get you wheels. He can cover your costs." She hissed a curse. "Keep insulting me if you like," I said, "but it will not change anything. We are separated. You do your thing, and I do mine." Then I hung up. The pattern repeated for days. Calls, threats, promises to sue. Accusations of abandonment. But Melanie had signed. The paper trail was clean. The evidence of her meetings with Damien predated the separation by weeks. My attorney laid it out in neat order. One evening a week into it, a voicemail arrived from Sophie that sounded like a cracked bell. "You cannot cut me off," she shouted. "You cannot yank tuition. I will take you to court for abuse or something. My dad says we can get a lawyer to spin this as your fault. Also, you sold the car. I cannot get to school. What am I supposed to do? Take the bus like a nobody. You will regret this." I saved the message. If anyone tried to paint me as a monster, I had her words in her voice. Whatever thin sympathy I had left for her burned away. She was not my child by blood. I had never adopted her. She had shown me contempt and then crossed into threats. During those weeks, I also worked with my lawyer to prepare an eviction. If Melanie tried to return and claim rights as a spouse or settler, the paperwork would be waiting. Notices went up on the front door. Copies went to the court and to her email. 2 weeks into Damien's birthday month, the movers came to take the last pieces I owned into storage. As the crew loaded a truck, a battered sedan limped to the curb. Melanie and Sophie climbed out with fury stamped on their faces. "You thief!" Sophie shouted, charging up the drive. "What are you doing with my furniture? Those chairs are mine. That table is mine." "Those are mine," I told the foreman. "Everything here is under my name. If either of them believes something is theirs, they can bring proof to my attorney." The foreman nodded. He was tall and calm, all work and no drama. Sophie tried to push past him, and he blocked her with an arm like a gate. "Ma'am, you cannot be inside while we work." "Do not touch my daughter," Melanie snapped at him. "Evan, call them off. This is still our house." "Not anymore," I said. "You signed the separation, and I hold the deed. I am removing my belongings. If you want to claim something, bring receipts." Sophie lunged again, voice shaking with rage. "You cannot do this. You owe me a college fund. You promised me a future." Her hand reached for my arm, and the mover slid between us like a wall. Another worker held her by the shoulders without malice, just enough to stop the flailing. "Let me go," she screamed. "I will end him." The performance would have been laughable if it were not so sad. Melanie started yelling about court and child support. "She is 18, I said, "and not my child. I owe nothing." Sophie's eyes went wide. "After all these years, you think you can throw us out?" I pointed to the envelope on the door. "That is the notice. Take it up with a judge. But remember, you both wanted this. You wanted your ex, Melanie. You wanted your father, Sophie. Go live there for good. I do not owe you a thing." Melanie's face flushed. "This is why I went back to Damien," she said. "You are cold. He may be rough, but he has a soul. You hide behind reason to be cruel." "Sure," I said. "I am the cruel one. I never laid a hand on you. I kept a roof over your heads, paid for cars, paid for classes. That must be cruelty." She had nothing to say to that. Sophie finally tore herself loose and stood shaking, tears bright and hot. "You will pay for this," she spat. "You will regret humiliating us." I gave a nod to the crew chief, and he told them both to leave, or the police would be called. They stomped back to the sedan, flung more insults, and roared away. The quiet that followed rang like a bell. Ugly, yes, but necessary. Actions carry weight. They were going to feel it. The next day, a new lawyer phoned, saying he represented Melanie. He tried to rattle me with claims of abandonment and psychological abuse. He demanded support for Sophie. I explained that Sophie was of age and not my dependent, and that Melanie had signed a separation that granted me control over my own assets during the period. My attorney joined the call and dismantled the bluff with dates, images, and messages from the investigator. In court, the judge reviewed the timeline and the documentation of Melanie's meetings with Damien. The decree granted divorce on the ground of adultery. The court awarded the small remainder I had intentionally left in the joint account to Melanie, a token that would cover a little rent or repairs on Damien's old sedan. I owed no support. The judge's tone made clear how he viewed the scheme. A month later, a mutual acquaintance mentioned that Melanie and Sophie had moved in with Damien. The reunion was not the fantasy they had spun. Reports of late nights and shouting, a door slammed hard, a slap when Melanie talked back. Sophie, once proud of her father, now rode public transport and learned that classmates did not pity stories about a stepfather who reclaimed a car he had purchased. I took no pleasure imagining it. Violence is never something to savor. But the choice had been theirs, and the cost was theirs. I had no duty to rescue them from outcomes they designed. By then, my own exit was in motion. I accepted a partnership in Bangkok that I had once turned down. With the finances untangled, I relocated. The heat hit like a wave at the airport, and the city's hum felt like a reset button. I rented a clean condo over the river and threw myself into work. I kept my personal life simple. Short dinners, a few polite dates, nothing deeper. I was still healing from the whiplash. On a Sunday afternoon, wandering a crowded market, my phone lit with a number from the States. I answered. Evan speaking. Silence, then a shaky voice I knew at once. Sophie. "Hi," she said, small and unlike herself. I stepped to the edge of the flow of people near a stand of coconuts. "You have 1 minute," I said. "Say what you need." "I am pregnant," she blurted. "My father is losing it. My mother is furious. They kicked me out. I am on a friend's couch. I have no money. I do not know what to do." Her words tumbled in a rush. I stared at the market stalls and felt memories crash in. The insults, the voicemails, the driveway scene. Pity flickered, and then memory pressed it flat. "Please," she said, "I will never disrespect you again. Can you help with prenatal care? Or a little rent?" "No," I said. She gasped. "Are you serious? You are just going to let me sink? You told me your mother could drink from any watering hole, and that you would too," I said. "Go find one now." "I am not your father. I owe you nothing. You helped destroy my marriage and promised to ruin me. Now you want my help." "I am scared," she said, crying. I cut in. "I know you are. I still will not wire a cent. You threatened me. You mocked me. I am done playing the provider in your story. I am hanging up. Good luck." "You made your bed." "Do not do this," she whispered. The line went dead. I stood there with my heart rattling ribs. Anger and sorrow wrestled, and bitterness won. I slid the phone into my pocket and rejoined the crowd. That was the last of it for a long time. The river moved past my balcony every night, dark and steady. I built a new routine that did not include checking a door for shoes that were not mine, or listening for late-night chimes from a phone I did not own. When ghosts came, I let them drift on the current, and did not invite them in. In time, I stopped replaying the kitchen table scene and the driveway shouting match. When the mind tried to cast me as the villain for drawing a line, I walked myself back through the facts. I did not raise a hand. I did not lie. I asked for fidelity and got a month-long holiday with an ex in return. I acted within the law. I protected my future. That was the story, and I allowed it to stand. Work filled the days. Language classes filled a few evenings. I changed passwords, closed the last joint account that the court awarded away, and blocked numbers I had no reason to read. The past dimmed, not erased, but no longer running the show. If there was a lesson, it was simple. Announcements do not turn betrayal into honesty. Boundaries are not cruelty. Paper trails matter. And when people tell you what they intend to do, believe them. Then act accordingly and keep walking. So noted. By the time the first anniversary of my move rolled around, the memories had dulled into something distant. Like an old scar that occasionally ached when the weather shifted, but no longer bled. I had settled into my life in Bangkok, finding comfort in the chaos, the hum of motorbikes, the scent of street food, the shouts of vendors calling through the humid air. The past existed like a photograph left in the sun. The colors faded, the edges curling, but still visible if you stared long enough. One night, sitting on my balcony with a glass of chilled whiskey, I opened an old email archive. It wasn't nostalgia. It was curiosity, mixed with a kind of detached reflection. I scrolled through messages between Melanie and me, the small talk that had once passed for affection. Then I reached the date of her confession, the morning she said she'd be gone for a month. I reread her words. "It's not cheating if I tell you." Even after all this time, I still couldn't decide whether she had truly believed that, or if she just needed to convince herself of a convenient lie. A few months after that night, a letter reached me through my attorney. It was from Melanie. The handwriting was neat, the tone oddly formal. She wrote that she wanted closure, that she'd made mistakes, that Damien had changed back into the man he used to be, which in truth meant the same angry, volatile drunk she'd divorced before. She said she was staying at a women's shelter outside St. Louis and was trying to find work. She asked if I could forgive her. There was no demand for money, no mention of Sophie, just a plea for forgiveness. I read it twice, folded it carefully, and burned it in an ashtray. Forgiveness didn't need to travel through the mail. It wasn't for her, it was for me, and I'd already given it to myself the day I stopped answering their calls. Months later, I heard indirectly that Damien had been arrested again for assault. Sophie had given birth to a boy and was living with a friend in a small apartment on the edge of town. The father of the child was never clear. A rumor suggested it wasn't her boyfriend, but a short-lived fling that ended when he disappeared. Someone sent me a picture through an old acquaintance, a photo of Sophie holding a baby, wrapped in a faded blue blanket. For a fleeting moment, I felt something I hadn't expected, a brief, sharp pang of pity. She looked exhausted, her expression stripped of arrogance, the way a person looks after learning too many hard lessons too soon. But I didn't reach out. I had rebuilt my life from the ashes of their choices, and stepping back into that fire wasn't an option. Pity was a luxury. Self-preservation was survival. By the second year, my business partnership in Bangkok had flourished. I'd bought into a logistics firm with a local partner named Arun, who became one of the few people I trusted implicitly. He once asked, over drinks on a Friday night, why I never mentioned family back home. I smiled and said, "Because some stories are better left untold." He nodded as if he understood, and maybe he did. Pain is a universal language. It doesn't need translation. One humid evening, as the city lights shimmered off the river, I found myself watching a young couple laughing by the pier, the woman leaning against the man, both of them radiant with the kind of innocence that precedes betrayal. And I realized I wasn't angry anymore. Not at Melanie, not at Sophie, not even at myself. The bitterness had burned out, leaving only quiet understanding. People destroy things they don't know how to nurture. Some wounds never close perfectly, but they do stop hurting. That night, I wrote a single line in my journal. Peace isn't forgiveness. It's indifference. Years passed. My hair grayed at the temples. The firm expanded, and I found something that almost resembled happiness. Not the kind that comes from romance, but from order, from stability, from knowing I had survived. Every now and then, I'd get a postcard from an old friend back in the States mentioning small-town gossip. Who got married? Who got arrested? Who fell apart? Once, there was a note saying that Melanie had been seen working at a diner outside of Kansas City, smiling politely to customers, wearing a name tag that said Mara. I wished her well in silence. I never saw Sophie again, but sometimes, in quieter moments, I'd wonder if her child had her eyes, sharp, defiant, unafraid, or if they had softened with time, the way hers had the day she called me from that friend's couch. Either way, their lives no longer touched mine, and that was the true ending of it all. No revenge, no justice, no reunion, just distance, clean and final. The last trace of their existence in my world was a folder of old photos I kept on a hard drive, wedding pictures, vacations, birthdays. One day, I deleted them all without hesitation. The computer hummed, the progress bar filled, and when it finished, I felt nothing. Nothing at all. And that finally was freedom.